What happens when the person meant to deliver justice becomes the one under investigation? What if that person is a judge linked to Nnamdi Kanu's case? And what if millions, both in naira and dollars, are suddenly part of the story? Is this just another corruption case, or is something much bigger unfolding behind the scenes? Stay with me, because this story goes deeper than it looks. It started like any other day in Nigeria's capital. Abuja moved at its usual pace, government offices buzzing, courtrooms preparing for proceedings, and citizens going about their daily routines. Nothing seemed out of place. Until suddenly, everything was. News broke quietly at first. Not with sirens or dramatic announcements, but with whispers. Messages passed between journalists, insiders, and legal observers. A judge had been arrested. Not just any judge. A judge connected to one of the most sensitive and controversial cases in Nigeria today, the trial of Nnamdi Kanu. Within hours, the whispers turned into headlines. The name at the center of it all, Justice James Omotosho. For many Nigerians, that name was already familiar. Justice Omotosho had presided over proceedings tied to Nnamdi Kanu's case, a case that has divided opinions, sparked protests, and drawn global attention. Now, that same judge was reportedly in custody. The arrest was carried out by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC, an agency known for pursuing financial crimes at the highest levels. But this situation felt different. Because this wasn't about a politician accused of corruption. It wasn't about a businessman under investigation. It was about someone from the judiciary, the very system responsible for interpreting the law and ensuring justice. And that changed everything. Almost immediately, questions began to surface. What led to this arrest? Why now? And how does this connect, if at all, to the Nnamdi Kanu case? According to early reports, the investigation centered around alleged massive financial transactions involving both naira and US dollars. Transactions significant enough to trigger scrutiny, and serious enough to warrant action. But the details were limited. Carefully controlled. And that lack of clarity only fueled speculation. What made the situation even more intense was the reported involvement of the Department of State Services, the DSS. This is not an agency that typically handles routine financial investigations. Their presence suggested that there might be more beneath the surface, something beyond simple financial irregularities. Something deeper. As the story spread, reactions came quickly. Legal analysts appeared on television, offering cautious commentary. Some emphasized the importance of due process, reminding the public that allegations are not proof. Others pointed to the unprecedented nature of the situation. Because a sitting judge being arrested is rare. A judge connected to a high-profile political case being arrested? That's something else entirely. Meanwhile, supporters of Nnamdi Kanu began to react. For them, this development raised serious concerns. Could this affect the integrity of the case? Could it suggest that unseen factors have been at play? Or was this simply an unrelated issue being interpreted through the lens of an already controversial trial? No one had clear answers. But everyone had opinions. Social media quickly became a battleground of narratives. Some saw the arrest as a sign of accountability, a demonstration that no one is above the law. Others viewed it with suspicion, questioning the timing and the possible motivations behind it. Because in Nigeria, context matters. And timing often tells its own story. As more information trickled in, one thing became clear. This was not just about one man. It was about perception. The perception of justice. The perception of fairness. The perception of whether the system can truly stand independent in the face of power, pressure, and politics. Behind the scenes, investigators were reportedly working to piece together a complex puzzle, tracking financial records, analyzing transactions, and building a case that would need to withstand intense scrutiny. Because taking action against a judge is not something done lightly. It carries weight. It sends a message. And it demands precision. At the same time, the courtroom where Nnamdi Kanu's case had been unfolding now felt different. Not physically, but symbolically. Because the figure who once sat at the center of that courtroom, interpreting arguments, making rulings, guiding the process, was now at the center of an entirely different kind of scrutiny. And that shift was impossible to ignore. As Nigerians tried to make sense of the situation, one question lingered above all others. Is this the beginning of a deeper revelation? Or just a single incident in a much larger system? Because sometimes, one event can open the door to many more. And as this story continues to unfold, it is becoming increasingly clear that what started as an arrest may evolve into something far more significant. Something that challenges assumptions. Something that raises uncomfortable questions. Something that forces a nation to look closely at the very institutions it depends on. As the news settled in, the initial shock began to give way to something else: curiosity. Not casual curiosity, but intense, almost urgent questioning. Because the more people thought about it, the more complex the situation seemed. A judge connected to the case of Nnamdi Kanu had been arrested over alleged financial transactions. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But it was the implications that truly captured attention. Because in a case as sensitive as Nnamdi Kanu's, every detail matters. Every decision. Every ruling. Every delay or progression. And now, those decisions were being viewed through a new lens. People began revisiting the timeline. Looking at past court proceedings. Analyzing statements and outcomes. Not necessarily to find fault, but to understand. To see if there were signs they had missed. Patterns they hadn't noticed. Moments that now seemed different. Meanwhile, the alleged financial transactions themselves became a focal point. Reports suggested large sums moving across accounts, involving both local and foreign currencies. That level of activity is rarely simple. It often involves layers, multiple accounts, different channels, and careful structuring. Financial experts know that such patterns can indicate attempts to obscure the origin or purpose of funds. But at this stage, nothing had been proven. And that distinction remained critical. Still, the questions persisted. Where did the money come from? What was it for? And was there any connection, direct or indirect, to the judge's role in high-profile cases? Including the case of Nnamdi Kanu? For supporters of Kanu, the situation reinforced long-standing concerns. They questioned whether the legal process had been entirely fair. They wondered whether external factors could have influenced decisions. They asked whether this investigation might reveal something bigger. On the other hand, many legal professionals urged caution. They emphasized that the integrity of the judiciary should not be undermined by unverified assumptions. They warned against drawing conclusions without evidence. And they stressed the importance of allowing the investigation to run its course. Both sides had valid points. And between them lay a growing tension. Because this was no longer just about facts. It was about trust. Trust in the system. There are moments when a single event forces an entire system to pause and reflect. This is one of those moments. Because what began as an arrest has now become something much larger, a national conversation about the integrity of the judiciary and the future of justice in Nigeria. The case involving Justice James Omotosho has placed the spotlight directly on the institutions that are meant to uphold fairness and accountability. And under that spotlight, every detail matters. Every action. Every response. Every decision moving forward. For many Nigerians, this situation has raised difficult questions. Not just about one individual, but about the system as a whole. Is the judiciary truly independent? Are there safeguards strong enough to prevent undue influence? And when issues arise, are they addressed transparently and effectively? These questions are not new, but they are now more urgent than ever. Because trust, once shaken, requires effort to rebuild. At the same time, there is another perspective, one that sees this moment as an opportunity. An opportunity for accountability, for reform, for strengthening the very institutions that are now under scrutiny. Because the true strength of any system lies not in its ability to avoid challenges, but in how it responds to them. If handled properly, this case could reinforce the principle that no one is above the law. Not even those who interpret it. But if mishandled, it could deepen skepticism and erode confidence. And that would have lasting consequences. Meanwhile, the shadow of Nnamdi Kanu continues to loom large. Because his case is not just a legal matter, it is a symbol of broader issues: political tension, regional identity, national unity, and the ongoing debate about the direction of the country. Any development connected to that case carries weight. And this development is no exception. As Nigerians watch events unfold, they are not just observing, they are evaluating, listening, interpreting, forming opinions. And those opinions will shape the narrative moving forward. In the end, this story is still being written. The investigation is ongoing. The facts are still emerging. And the full picture has yet to be revealed. But one thing is certain. This moment matters. Because it challenges assumptions. It raises questions. And it forces a closer look at the systems that define justice. And as the story continues, one question remains at the center of it all. When the guardians of justice are themselves questioned, what happens next?